Right, we'll make a start. Welcome to today's meeting of the Local Pension Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and it will be available for viewing after the meeting. We have received apologies from Mr. Tom Barclay, who will be substituted by Mr. Robert Ashman, and apologies from Mr. Keith Merry. As we have a number of new members joining this committee, I'm going to ask each member to introduce themselves. I'll start off myself. I'm Councillor Dan. I'm normally the Vice Chair and chairing as a substitute in place of Tom Barclay. I represent the Birstall area in Leicestershire County Council. So I don't know if we want to start over the left-hand side.
Councillor Dean Gamble, OB Division. Thank you.
Good morning, and gentlemen. I'm Councillor Sue Waddington from Leicester City Council.
Thank you.
Zubair Limbada. I'm on the council as university representative from De Montfort University.
Morning, Councillor Adam Clark from Leicester City Council.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ashley Wilson from Hinckley and Bosworth District Council.
Mellis Graham, Borough Councillor representing the Borough Councils on the Pension Fund.
Kevin Feltham, Leicestershire County Council representing the Gartree Division.
Robert Ashman, Leicestershire County Council, Forest and Measham Division.
Hi, I'm Jeff Lawrence. I'm a new employee rep on the Pensions Committee. I was elected at the AGM in December. I worked for the County Council for 34 years and De Montfort University for 4 years.
Nick Booth, employee rep. I work for the Leicester City Council.
That's great, brilliant. Okay, before we go move into the meeting, members will be aware of the sad passing of Councillor Ratilal Govind, I hope I got that right, who passed away on the 2nd of December. Councillor Govinda had been City Councillor since 2015 and served on the Local Pension Committee for a number of years. He'd been involved with the investment subcommittee of the Pension Committee. I'd just ask if members would join me in a minute of silent tribute to Councillor Govind. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. I'd also like to pass our thanks to Claire Scott, the fund's independent advisor, who stepped down from her role. Her contribution and assistance to the fund has been invaluable, especially in regards to assisting the involvement of the fund's government to help us achieve best practice. Finally, I'd like to pass our thanks to Jackie Dean for her long-standing commitment and contribution to the Leicestershire Pensions Fund as an employee representative, which ended following the fund's annual general meeting. Okay, going on to the agenda proper. Item number 1, minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of November 2021. I propose that the meeting held on 26th of November are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed by everybody in the room by show of hands or not? Everyone's happy? No comments on this minutes? Okay, thank you. We'll sign those minutes at the appropriate time. Agenda item number 2, question time. I've received no questions from the public. Agenda item number 3, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. I've received no questions from members. Item number 4, regarding urgent items, I'm not aware of any urgent items. Item number 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Does any member have an interest that they wish to declare? Okay, brilliant, that's great. Item number 6, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35. I'm not aware of any petitions received. So item number 7. The first substantive item on today's agenda is a pension fund policy report. Ian Howe, the pensions manager, will present this report. Over to you, Ian.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for the introduction. I hope everybody can see and hear me okay. I assume that's the case, and I'll continue. The purpose of the report is to provide an annual update of the pension fund's current strategies and policies, and to seek approval of the distribution of death grant policy, the over and underpayment policy, the revised administration and communication strategy, and the investment advisor objectives. Also included as an appendix is the fund's discretion policy. This is included for completeness, but the Director of Resources has delegated power to make the changes to the discretion policy, and that has already been agreed. The administration and communication strategy and the investment advisor objectives are existing documents, and there are only very minor changes. The changes to the admin and communication strategy are detailed on page 0.4 of the report in the table. The distribution of death grants and the over and underpayment policy are new and designed to bring increased transparency and to exercise good governance. They are effectively formalising practices already in place. In the interests of time, I wasn't proposing to go into any detail on any of the specifics within the various documents, and they are included as appendices to the report. However, if any members of the committee have any questions, I'm obviously very happy to take them. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Mr. Howe. I've got a question here from Councillor Graham.
Sorry, it's just I made it 76-77 on the distribution of the death grant. It seems to be, I quite see that it's up to the officers to decide, but it's a very long, complicated list, which also includes stepchildren, things like this. And I wondered if it wouldn't be easier just to have a priority list, looking at it really from the officer's point of view, rather than, I can quite see it's been built up over time, but it just seemed to have a lot of ifs and buts, and then so the next one's on. And the thing that really struck me was sort of stepchildren and wicked stepmothers suddenly arriving. So that was really my only question: is it not too vague, and should it not be tightened up a bit? Yeah,
it's a very good question, Councillor, and thank you for your question. I think from experience has taught us actually to keep it as it is actually easier. And if you do have a list, it can actually become too prescriptive and actually can create more problems than it's trying to resolve. So this isn't an easy area, and we do sometimes have to take legal advice on individual cases. And this has been developed with our colleagues in legal services. So we are more comfortable with the position as it's suggested in that document. But I do take Councillor's point. But to be too prescriptive and too listy is potentially more tricky.
Thank you. That answer your quick queries then. Okay, does anyone else have any comments or questions on this? Sorry, Nick, I couldn't see you there. Sorry, Nick Booth.
Yeah, I understand the problems you have sometimes. You know, how do you deal with bigamous marriages, etc. But the question I've got, it refers to cohabitees, how are they defined, and how could people who are employees, protect themselves to ensure that, their pensions are, we do have cohabitees pensions, but it's not quite clear how that is defined under the pension fund. Do they have to live full time with each other or not, or whatever? And it also refers to interdependence. How's that defined? How do officers actually decide that ticks the box, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do, Nick. And again, another very good question, and indeed some of the challenges that we deal with almost on a at least weekly basis, Nick. In terms of cohabiting partners, the legislation states you have to be a cohabiting partner for 2 years. So effectively live together as partners for 2 years. In order for us to establish that, we do actually ask the relevant people to sign a declaration to state that they have met the requirements under the legislation. But indeed, Nick, there are always challenges with things of this nature, and indeed I could sit here and talk for ages of the various different types and queries we get. But ultimately, if indeed there is ever a challenge brought, the people do have right of appeal against any decision we make, and we would always try and resolve every case amicably and inform all parties what the ultimate decision is, Nick. Indeed, there are occasions, rare occasions, I'm pleased to say, where we can't, and it does have to go to legal services, and indeed has occasionally ended up in appeals that have gone to the Ombudsman. But we would always do our best to avoid that in every scenario we possibly can. But there is a declaration effectively that the people would have to sign to state they meet the requirements to qualify.
Brilliant, thank you. If there are no further questions, can't say more hands up. We've been asked to approve the revised administration strategy Appendix A, the distribution of death grant policy Appendix C, the over and underpayment policy Appendix D, and the investment advisor objectives Appendix E. Is that agreed by everyone in the room? Just quick show of hands. I think that's everyone's agreed. No problems. So we'll take that as agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Item number 8, next item on the agenda, Responsible Investment Plan 2022. Bhulesh, the Senior Financial Analysis, will introduce this item. So over to you, Bhulesh.
Thank you, Chair. This is our third responsible investment plan. We had an original plan approved at the January 2020 Local Pension Committee and another at the following year, January 2021. We've got a progress update for that plan appended to this report as well. I'll just go back to point 4 on the paper. RI is an essential part of the fund's approach to investing, and we do reflect that in the ISS, which incorporates ESG, and which is a component of RI. We've developed this plan in conjunction with LGPS Central's in-house RI team, as in previous years. Outputs and recommendations from the climate risk report, which the committee received in November last year, it's also been incorporated into the draft 2022 plan, which I'll talk about in a moment. It builds on the 2020 and 21 plan, improves on the approaches and beliefs as detailed in the fund's investment strategy statement, with the addition of a climate strategy, which members approved work for at the November 2021 committee. Point 8 on page 94 highlights some points from the table below it. So we've got in the coming year, we've got regular updates on the development of the fund's climate strategy. We will develop that into a number of work streams, and the committee will have opportunity to shape this over the year. Update to the ISS, the investment strategy statement, to complement the findings and proposals contained within the climate strategy report to the committee later in the year. We will continue quarterly reporting of stewardship report and inclusion of voting metrics from listed equity investments. And finally, reviews of investment managers, ESG approaches alongside presentations to the committee. You'll note at every committee meeting last year in 2021, we brought in a manager and asked them to talk about their ESG approaches. I don't have much more to say on that. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Bhulesh. Does anyone have any questions or comments following the presentation? I've got Councillor Clark's hand up first.
To what degree would the adoption of the climate strategy change the RI strategy in year?
We're hoping to get a draft response to the committee and obviously updates during the year. I think we'll struggle to change things in year. We'll hear more about our strategy later in the agenda today. We've got Philip from Hymans here. We'll talk about the strategy during the year as well, but largely that's the case, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and you're happy with that, aren't you, Mr. Clark? Got Mr. Lawrence, who has got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've noted that the climate strategy circulated prior to this meeting, the Cheshire, Derbyshire and West Midlands, that Leicestershire is a bit behind other funds in determining its climate change strategy. In terms of if having a climate change strategy is a dependency for updating the investment and funding strategies, then I'm just thinking, if the date given in the RI plan of late 2022, it seems quite a long way off in terms of, having the opportunity then to feed that climate change strategy into the funding and investment strategy. I just wonder whether the committee would consider bringing these dates forward a bit so that the pension fund can really take account of climate change as soon as practically possible, perhaps by devoting more committee time and officer resources to it.
Thank you. Just whether Bhulesh has got or Declan's got a response to put it out to them.
Thanks. I suppose it's important to know that it's not that climate change isn't being taken into account. It's just not as an overarching kind of strategy. So there's been a sort of responsible investment approach for quite a few years. So it is important to know that it's not that nothing's been done. It's just that the formalisation into a strategy is still quite a recent thing. And I think when we do the sort of session later, you'll see just the sheer amount of work involved in a climate strategy. So although you could push one through, the guidance that we're going to propose would follow is only it's relatively new. A lot of the strategies that you've seen, and you'll see there's it's quite a range, I suppose, of content in them. I suppose to sort of try and use a fair word, between some of them which are pretty light touch and others that are sort of more all encompassing. So it's trying to just sort of pitch that right. So personally, I don't think it'd be the right approach, just trying, I suppose, to rush the strategy, because we run the risk of having a strategy that I suppose that the committee doesn't particularly own, because part of it's going to be an education piece as well, and making sure we have the debates about what should or shouldn't be in the strategy. So personally, I think we've got a fallback, and we are doing quite a bit already. We're doing quite a lot more than we did if you go back 5 years. We're doing heaps more than we used to. So I'd prefer us to take the year and have a strategy that we're really comfortable. But like I say, you'll see later, just there's heaps of work, and then that's the start of a whole load more work, as opposed to the end of the journey, as it were.
No, thank you. Do you have any come back, Mr. Lawrence, on that? Great. Councillor Clark.
Just quite flippantly, we are in danger of taking the Sue Gray line and waiting for the report. And I do think perhaps we do need to consider what action we are taking now in light of COP26, taking into account what my colleague said. We are not accounting for COP26 currently as radically as we should, and I'll hit this later. But saying that we're waiting for the report, I don't think is a response.
Just to come back on, it's not a case that we're waiting for a report. It's just, well, yeah, but it's important to just realise it's actually is going to sort of, I suppose, do the work, and it's part of that development. So it's not just a case of sort of sitting and waiting for something. It is actually work as you go through the year.
Great, thank you. Does any come back, or does anyone have any further sorts of comments on this? I think as what work is going on, and the member sort of feedback is well, is to carry on with the work that's in progress at the moment, and not just waiting till the end, but it is happening. So I think that's a fairly reasonable approach to take. So unless anyone's got any other questions, we have been asked to approve the Responsible Investment Plan 2022, and is that agreed? I see a show of hands. Anyone not in agreement? We'll take that as agreed then. Thank you. Right, item number 9, agenda overview of the asset strategy and structure. For item number 9, it is proposed that we take this item as read and move into discussion under item 13. Is that agreed, or any? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to do just a brief sort of overview of the paper. I won't touch on the pieces that Hyman's will pick up in the private session, just sort of just to avoid duplicating, but just for members of the committee who've been sort of on the committee for less than a year, kind of we look at the strategic asset allocation, basically, where do we invest, whether it's sort of equities, bonds, etc. on an annual basis. Not every funds do this, but we do think it's good practice to do. And as you probably expect, you don't tend to get massive changes on a year in year out basis. Once you set your plan, you want to kind of see how your plan falls out, and changing your strategic asset allocation can be pretty expensive as well as you kind of come in and out of the markets. Obviously incur kind of buying costs and sort of you actually influence the market itself. One thing to note though, the SAA is really important. I mean, there's been studies in the past where it does show that how you allocate your assets is more important than actually the selection of the managers. If you give the managers a bad section of the market to work in, well, they're always going to be struggling, and kind of vice versa. Even a bad manager can benefit from a rising tide, as it were, as all boats kind of come up. So if you look on page 100, it's just a summary table of what the strategic asset allocation changes were last year and what's been done in the current year. And I'll just do this by exception of the ones that we haven't sort of fully picked up. The first one is the targeted return, and we'll just wait on the central product. It's expected now probably Q1 next year, so there'll be a decision coming up in the next few months on that one. So we're invested in sort of that target return, but there'll be a change in sort of manager setup. Infrastructure is one where we've kind of invested into and made the decisions necessary to hit the target weight. But one thing we've seen is kind of the queues to get your money into infrastructure is very long, and often they're either buying companies or kind of in some cases even sort of building assets as well. So queues at one point had sort of extended out to 18 months. It's very difficult to keep on track with those. And property similar, although we're invested in property, we've been underweight in truth for several years, I think actually before even I got involved with the fund. And we've been historically quite relaxed about it because of where property have been. But again, it's another area where managers have struggled to identify sort of assets. So colleagues have been had a buying instruction for a few years, and they've just bought one small asset. So overall, we've sort of pretty much done what was required of the SAA, but there's a few bits that sort of a little bit out of kilter. One thing we've tried to do in the report this time, go down to sort of paragraph 9, is within there, just kind of trying to have a few sort of thought provokers, not necessarily to go into a huge amount of detail, but just kind of with the glorious benefit of hindsight, just kind of make some sort of just a handful of observations. So the first one, if you look down in kind of paragraph 12, it's just kind of a comparison. So we invest in passives, and passives are great because they're just kind of they're a little bit sort of once you've set, they're very low cost, and they'll just kind of obviously kind of by their nature just sort of follow the market. But you can make choices about which passives you invest in. At the moment, we've got a skew more towards the UK compared to kind of what we'd see across the sort of all the world sort of stock markets, and a little bit less in the US. And historically, we had even more skews in there. We used to invest in a product called RAFI, which was very value based, which is kind of in theory companies that kind of undervalued compared to their book value isn't being sort of reflected in their overall company value. And last year, that's kind of worked really, quite well. The UK markets performed really strongly. We've had really good sort of returns over last year. But if you look back over the sort of 3-5 years, like I say, with the glorious sort of benefit of hindsight, not such sort of not great choices. And it's kind of it's one of those things you set your strategic asset allocation, you place your bet and you kind of see how it goes. But I suppose my takeaway from this is just kind of, as a committee, just kind of, just make sure we challenge complexity. Are we sure really what sort of skewing from the kind of the average, as it were, is kind of going to be beneficial? So that was an interesting one to me, kind of just where we are with their choices, and it fits with them. I'm just going to recommend a review of our equity allocations later in the year after the climate strategy. So there's a nice fit there with that. The next one I was going to pick up was the sort of, if you get down to paragraph 13, the climate factor fund, and this is way too early in truth to make a proper judgment on this fund, because it's only been a year since launch. But the back testing of this fund suggested that it had outperformed its kind of passive alternatives. But when you look over the last year, it's not behind by much, but it is a little bit behind. And it's kind of when you set up these sort of factor funds, whether it's climate or otherwise, they may start off with sort of all the companies that are in the sort of the old world index, but then they play around with them. And it could be in this case, it does it sort of very much with the sort of the size of the companies involved, the geographic split, or the sectors that these companies are involved in. And those skews obviously taking you away from the average. The back testing suggested it outperform on average, but actually the last year has been under. So it's way too early to sort of make a judgment on it. It's just another sort of interesting kind of point about kind of just keeping an eye on sort of the choices and the decisions that we made. It's great that we make them rationally on an evidence basis, but just keeping an eye on how they're doing what we expect them to do. One that's kind of going to come up probably sooner than the others, the target return down on paragraph 19. Again, an interesting one. It's kind of a little corner of the fund where kind of managers have got a bit more freedom to move across asset classes in some cases and do things a little bit differently. And across the year, 3 year, 5 year, it's been good. The sort of target return has beaten their performance measure on every sort of on all those sort of 3 time periods. The interesting thing is actually it's been a bit of a drag on the funds, and in some ways, in fairness to the target return manager, it's not their fault that equities have performed so strongly over the last kind of sort of decade, and it's been sort of strong and sort of for a long period of time. So again, it's an interesting one that kind of they make your choices on a rational basis, but did that complexity pay out? Not in this case, but did we get a benefit from diversification? Well, absolutely yes. So you'd kind of like sort of some protections there and other benefits that don't always come through the numbers. The paragraph sort of 22, 23 is quite an interesting one. We kind of played around a bit with strategy. Just if you simplify the whole world down and so you just take something like a Vanguard fund where they just kind of do a passive mix between stocks and bonds and rebalance between the two. If you did that as opposed to sort of all the different bits and pieces we do, how do you land out? And the table in 23 suggests kind of actually you'd be a little bit better off. Now, whether you'd actually in truth want to risk just sort of putting all sort of literally billions of pounds just on sort of a single passive tracker or not. Again, it's an interesting one on that kind of complexity points. Is it kind of where does it land up compared to where you could have just been sort of maybe a bit simpler? So again, it's kind of, like I said, I've said it a couple of times, glorious hindsight's always really easy, but it's just to kind of, I suppose, just put some thoughts and in sort of committee sort of mind as we look at the strategic asset allocation, just sort of ask questions about kind of, is the diversification worth it, or actually are we going too narrow and kind of betting on a stream that if it doesn't pay off is going to be sort of difficult. Skipping a lot of the next bit of the report does just pick up what Hyman's will sort of talk through. So just jumping down to paragraph 41, it talks about rebalancing, and this is an area where we need to just do a bit of work this year. Things have been kind of rebalancing has been really hard sort of over the last sort of 3 years, because we've been sort of trying to do more and more pooling, you're waiting for products to come available. Now that sort of the suite of products Central's got is kind of pretty much complete. It's nearly there. It's kind of sort of hopefully sort of take a bit more active approach with rebalancing to make sure things like cash are kind of managed a lot, I suppose, to a much lower level, but also things like we do sort of hug the strategic asset allocation a little bit better. So again, just highlighting there's going to be a piece of work this year. So happy to take any questions on the report.
I think on this, what the proposal was that the discussion is moved under item 13 in the closed section. Okay, so can we? Okay, if we can take this one. It's a move. Oh, sorry, you're happy to later. Okay, brilliant. So everyone's happy to take this into item 13. Then that's agreed into the session afterwards. So take it as no dissenters to that. So we will move on. Item number 10, date of next meeting. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled to take place on Friday, the 25th of March 2022 at 9:30 a.m. Item number 11, any other items which chairman's decided to take as urgent? There are no urgent items. Item number 12, exclusion of press and public. I move that in accordance with the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the remainder of the items of the business on the grounds that they will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information. Everybody's happy with that. Nobody's got any problems with that. So we'll just wait for Kat to confirm the live stream has ended.